morning, everybody. My name is Alson Obando, and this morning I am representing the Belize Association of Planners. And this morning we have a very exciting presentation for this morning. I'm going to be presenting on the community mapping for gendered climate resilience action in Dangriga and Hopkins. Next slide, please, Ms. Santos. This project has been going on for about, I would say, a year now. But before I start presenting, here's a short outline of my presentation. Please feel free to write down or make note of any questions that you may have. I'll be more than glad to answer them after the presentation. Next slide, please. So for the introduction for this morning, we have a picture of the Belize Association of Planners Board of Directors, and in the middle, you can see our president, Ms. Carolyn Trench. Next slide, please. Just who are the Belize Association of Planners? BAP, as we are more better than known as, we like to think of ourselves as champions of safe and resilient sustainable communities, and we engage in things such as planning. And our vision is to be a proactive professional planning organization committed to assuring social justice and promoting sustainability in the natural and built environment. The mission of is to engage in these planning is to address relevant planning and development issues in Belize by working in partnership with public and private sectors and civil society organizations and the people of Belize through research, education, advocacy, and action. Next slide, please. And we do this through working with our partners, such as community working groups, CSOs, academia, the government, donors, various volunteers, and we like to leverage these relationships and engage in networking however we can. Next slide, please. We also like to try and see how we could meet in any way, shape, or form these 3 UN Sustainable Development Goals, which is number 11, 13, and 17. 11 is the sustainable cities and communities, 13 is climate action, and 17 is partnerships for the goals. Next slide, please. We also like to look at how we could make localized climate action linked to community challenges. So these challenges that we like to look at include flooding, health, mobility, safety, livelihoods, and the environment. And on the screen, we can see a picture of an area that we have worked in the past, which is in Belize City. Next slide, please. And on this slide, what you can see is a map showing the results of working in this area. This is the Jane Usher community in Belize City. And as you can see from this map, you can see various different attributes such as the streets, different building footprints, and then we can gather data such as how much of these roads are paved and unpaved, whether the pavement is asphalt or concrete. And we like to look at these different things so that we can make analysis and see how we can look at how climate change may be affecting some of these things, or how we can help the community with some of these challenges. Next slide. So for this morning, I'll be talking to you guys about the Engender project that I have been working on recently. Next slide, please. So many of you might be wondering what exactly Engender is. So Engender stands for Enabling Gender Responsive Disaster Recovery, Climate and Environmental Resilience in the Caribbean. And this is a project that we have been working on in partnership with the Ministry of Sustainable Development, Climate Change and Disaster Risk Management through the National Climate Change Office and the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center. And this project seeks to scale up existing efforts to increase the adaptive capacity of communities with impacts of climate change through identification of adaptation barriers caused by climate-related stressors, particularly sea level rise, increasing temperatures, intense storms on the two coastal communities in southern Belize, which is Dangriga and Hopkins village. Next slide. So the objectives of this project, or the main objective of this project, is to assess the state of the built environments of buildings and infrastructure, and to assess the individual capacities, social policies, and institutional frameworks in these areas. But this objective is then broken down into three different components. However, for this morning's presentation, I'll be focusing on spatial activity, which is activity 1.2, which reads, conducting building footprints and gender sensitive socioeconomic, cultural and livelihoods, physical and environmental analysis of the communities to produce physical and environmental, social, economic and demographic sensitivity situational profile for the community. And this is just telling us that we will be making maps to look at some of these climate change challenges that are happening in Dangriga and Hopkins. Next slide. So the spatial approach, in terms of how we went about doing this, in terms of looking for data and the methodology to source that data, we took a spatial approach. And the first thing that we need to ask is, what kind of data did we need to make these maps of these areas to do analysis? So next slide, please. So the data that we needed included land use, building footprints, town and village boundaries, the road networks, community assets, emergency shelters, areas of vulnerable flood, areas that are vulnerable to flooding, and then other hazards in the area. Next slide. So for the methodology, the way how we went about sourcing the land use data is we sourced the data from existing spatial layers that were requested from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Lands Department. And as you can see here on the screen, this is a land use map that uses a land use layer from 2012. However, we wanted to update these areas so that we could have the most current data on Dangriga and Hopkins. Next slide. So the way how we wanted to go about updating the land use layers is we wanted to find someone or an organization that had existing data on building footprints in Belize. And so what we did is we made an agreement and we partnered with the Statistical Institute of Belize to access their building footprint layers for the community. And this was important because we didn't want to do double work, as they say. If the data exists already, we wanted to find some means whereby we could share our data and we can improve on the data together. SIB had already created these building data footprints for the entire country because they use them for their own purposes. However, what we wanted to do is find out how we could update these building footprints, because the way how they did it in the past is they use Google Earth imagery. However, what we wanted to do is get recent satellite imagery of these areas to update the building footprints. So next slide. So what we did was we went on the ground to map the area using high resolution orthomosaic imagery of Dangriga and Hopkins. And what we did was we used the Mavic 2 Zoom and the Mavic 2 Pro, and we did we used a flight planning app, drone deploy, and the image processing tool that we use to stitch the orthomosaic is Esri Drone to Map. Esri Drone to Map is greatly improved now. The efficiency of the image processing was more user-friendly than it was in the past. And we were able to get the orthomosaic on Arcgis online so that we could work with it. Next slide. So here's an image of the drone flight path that we did. This is just a small area that we did drone flight in. Next slide. And then with the drone images, we uploaded those on the SIB platform and utilized them to digitize the new building footprints that were missing from the Google Earth imagery. And we were able to get high resolution drone imagery for these areas that are rarely worked in Belize. So this was a good effort by the Belize Association of Planners and SIB. Next slide. And then what we did was, after digitizing all the new updated building footprints, we went on the ground to ground truth all of the building footprints to ensure that the buildings that we did digitize or were digitized in the past were still there, that they existed, and we collected photographs of those buildings and the different layer attributes for those buildings, such as what kind of condition the building was in, if it was an elevated building, a one-story building, a two-story building, and so on and so forth. And we did this using the Arcgis Art Collector app. And now, for those of you that have never used this Esri software before, it is able to be used on any mobile device, so a tablet. And here in this picture, you can see the map board of directors working on the ground in Hopkins, and then some of the community members that help us to collect the data on the ground. So it allows you to download a small tile of the map that you're working on ArcGIS Online or ArcMap Pro. And you are able to update all the attributes in that small area tile that you downloaded to the tablet. And you are able to change the building footprint there, update all of the attributes right there on the tablet, and you are able to take pictures on the ground of whatever you're grounding. So these features that Art Collector enabled us to do a very detailed ground truthing mission both in Dangriga and Hopkins. Next slide, please. So we also did a community cartography exercise where we went to the communities and we engaged with different community members to ask them what are some areas that you consider community assets, as well as vulnerable areas, areas that are in the community that maybe experience a lot of flooding or erosion. We wanted to look at those areas as well. So in this picture, you can see myself working along with one of the community members to mark some of the areas that are community assets or flood prone areas in Hopkins village. Next slide, please. And then here, we have the finalization of the spatial data layers to produce maps for analysis and reporting. So currently this project is still ongoing. So the analysis that's going to be done is still in processing. However, this is one of the land use maps that we created for Hopkins. And initially you can see it's very detailed. And what you can see as well is that it uses the updated land use layer that we made using the building footprints, the ground truthed building footprints that were then made using the drone imagery. Last slide, please. So I'd like to thank all of you for listening to me this morning. Thank you very much, Ms. Santos and everyone from the Total Business Solutions for planning the annual GIS Day. I'm very disappointed that we didn't get to meet in person, because I look forward to the GIS Day Expo in Belize every year. However, I think we do have some time to ask questions. However, if you would like to contact the Belize Association of Planners, we are available on all forms of social media, and on the bottom is a link to our website. So please reach out to us if you have any more questions. But thank you very much.